Hello, 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 and welcome to the Woman Empowered and Free Summit People Pleasers Creating Healthy Boundaries and Emotional Resilience. I put this summit together because there's a lot of women and men out there who suffer from this disease to please, and it eats at our soul in so many ways, and it eats at our relationships, especially the relationship with ourselves. So I put this beautiful array of speakers together, and I'm really super excited to have Dr. Alan Berger back this year. And yeah, so thank you for coming in. I'm just going to tell a little bit about you, and then I want to dive into what you're so good at doing, and that's talking about emotional sobriety and how it impacts so many different areas in our life. So, Dr. Berger is an internationally recognized expert on addiction recovery, combining modern psychotherapy with the 12 steps of AA. And with over 52 years, what is it now? 53?
Today it's 53. It's actually my anniversary today.
Oh, wow. 53 years of
We are
personal.
recording this on the day of my anniversary.
That's awesome. Congratulations. 53 years of sobriety, personal recovery experience, and he began in Hawaii. Dr. Berger holds a doctorate in clinical psychology from the University of California and is known for his dynamic and practical approach to therapy and training. Dr. Berger's authored several influential books, including the popular 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety and the 12 Stupid Things That Mess Up Recovery. And he's active in private practice, teaching, podcasting, summiting, writing, and enjoys tennis and boxing at the same time. Enjoys
There
it. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so honored to have you here. And I know things are coming up and down in your life, but emotional sobriety, when I hear that, I think of you because you're the one who introduced the concept to me. And we're talking about emotional resilience. What can you talk about the relationship between the two, whether they are separate or how they can merge together in terms of people who do too much, try to be too much, all of that. I guess it's the I'm not enough wound or trying to please others.
Well, the way I think of emotional resilience, because first of all, I think it's a real important topic that you're digging into here, Janine, because it's really at the heart of mental health and of being able to live a life that works in many different ways. And I think of emotional resilience as being able to take a hit in life and even a heavy hit and be able to at some point recover your balance. So resilience, if we think of it as the ability to bounce back, to be able to, really go through a difficult, painful time and find our way not only just back to balance, but I like to think of this as more of a, because now we talk about, instead of just talking about, post-traumatic stress, we talk about post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
Trauma is one of these issues that can knock us off balance. And depending on how we process that experience we're having, that's going to determine whether or not we're able to recover our balance, or like I like to think about it, is to grow and develop some wisdom from the experience we're having. So resilience is being able to claim the experience we're having rather than letting the experience claim us.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
so that's just, I think, a clever way of just saying is that it's our relationship to what is happening that's the key issue. And it's not what's happening, because what we know is that what is happening, you know, what goes on for us. So if, let's say, I have a major disappointment in my life, whatever it may be, a relationship ends, or I don't get something that I've wanted, or I was hoping for a raise at a job, or I lose my job, something like that, right? A real disappointment. So it's, what does that disappointment mean to us that is going to create the difficulty and is also going to create a possibility of being able to digest that experience in a certain way that's going to help us cope with it better.
Mhm.
You see, we say this all the time in psychology, and it's not. I wish I could claim the authorship of this, but it came from Dr. Virginia Satir, who's one of the first family therapists and experts on self-esteem. And she said the problem is never the problem. The problem is always lies in how we are coping with whatever is happening. She says that is the issue. It's how we cope with what is, not what is happening. So that becomes a very important piece in terms of this emotional resilience. And look, how does that tie into to emotional sobriety? Well, that's at the heart of emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety is all about being able to meet the challenges and the issues that life and the tasks that life is going to set in front of us and be able to deal with them well. So it's really at the heart of it. Now, I think it'd be important to talk about one of the ways that we cause a lot of trouble for ourselves is the expectations we have about life.
Yeah.
And so, it's hard to be emotionally resilient if you are expecting the impossible from life.
Hmm. And I just lit up inside when well, all of this is good, but expectations, I call it expectationitis because I can't really. It's like a disease because regardless of what age or what relationship, whatever expectations we have, if they don't happen, then there's that form of disappointment that you just talked about, and it's how we cope and manage and handle that disappointment. And I think that can just go sideways in so many people's lives. And I mean, even my 15-year-old the other day said something, her expectations were here, she didn't get them met, she turned this way, and it was so interesting to observe that, which I've really been working on in myself. And my child has that for generational um, behavior. But yeah, expectations. Tell me more about that and like
Well,
what.
if you see, like you said, you call it expectationitis. Well, but what you're really capturing is that, we automatically generate expectations. It's part of being human, and it's part of what being a human, comma, being is all about. The issue becomes is what is the nature of that expectation? You see, if my expectation is outrageous and is what we would call an unreasonable expectation, meaning an expectation that is going to diminish possibilities instead of enhance those, then I'm setting myself up for trouble. Now, what might be one? So, Mike, let's just take one that I think a lot of people suffer from. You know, um, Life is supposed to be easy, is that things are just supposed to happen for us. And people have this expectation. It is promoted in our culture. The way this brilliant author said it, Christopher Lasch, who's the author of a book called Culture of Narcissism, he says, we expect way too much from our environment and way too little from ourselves.
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. We expect way too much from our environment. Meaning, if things in my environment happen the way I think they're supposed to, I'll be okay. See, we call it if only this would happen consciousness. I will be okay if these things go down. And see, so that consciousness that grows out of expecting so much from our environment is going to diminish us as a human being. It says, I need these situations around me to be a certain way to be okay. It doesn't have to do with who I am, it has to do with these circumstances. And people don't realize, they think that those expectations are normal because they are propagated in our culture. Those ideas are very much a part of the fabric in this culture that we have that is not a wisdom-based culture. And so in many ways, we've got to wake up and realize this culture has put you in a trance. And part of that trance is giving you a set of expectations that will make life very difficult for you, that will not help you live the kind of life you want to live. It will diminish possibilities, not increase or enhance those possibilities.
Yeah, and just that, like you talk about expectations and that desire or the need from that external, from the outside to work for us, and how that really aligns with the need for approval or the external validation from a people pleasers or a perfectionist or some sort of mind where you just, you're trying to make everything right
Yeah.
according to these expectations.
And even that, see, that's not pathological. See, if you think about what I'm saying is that we all start life from a position of 100% dependency in our mother's womb, right? So we cannot support ourselves in our existence and our growth. We need, that womb. We need, the umbilical cord to provide us with all of these nutrients and proteins and different things that we need to start our development. But the minute we're born, an interesting process starts. See, we call it's the process of differentiation. We differentiate ourselves from our mother. The umbilical cord's cut. That's the first stage of differentiation. And so no longer is mom providing me with oxygen. Now, what do I have to do? My first act of differentiation. Yep, that's it. And you just did it. You inhaled. And
Yep,
then we
yep.
exhale. See, we inhale and we exhale. That inhalation and exhalation, right? That process is our first movement towards supporting ourselves. And we move in that direction the rest of our life. And that is hardwired. You move from this position of dependency and simplicity to a much more complex being that is now doing a lot of these things that were done for us before. At some point, see, this is where things happen. Biologically, it pretty much unfolds if you're, neurologically intact. Around, right from the beginning, you want to please, the smile instinct comes up very early on in life. The desire to walk. We crawl first. We want to be able to ambulate. We want to be able to move ourselves around in this world. So at around 1 years old, we start to experiment with walking, right? We're differentiating ourselves from being carried now to a position where we're going to walk ourselves. So we're supporting ourselves. So this is happening throughout life. Biologically, like I said, you're going to meet these, you're going to experience these milestones the rest of your life. What happens though is emotionally, it's not hardwired. It's so dependent on the experiences you have early on. And if what our parents are doing with us is really transmitting, right, and transferring the culture to us, because that's the job of a parent, is to teach us how to function in this world. Well, guess what? If the ideas that they're giving us aren't very good, you know, you know,
Truth.
junk in, junk out, right? I mean, and a lot of the ideas we have about that, we need validation the rest of our lives, right? We hear that all the time. We need to be validated. It's true. It's very important early on in our lives to be validated. You have to be seen and you have to be celebrated. If you're going to have a healthy relationship with yourself later on, you need to develop a sense of self. And that
Mhm.
sense of self comes from how somebody is holding up a mirror to you. And if a parent is able to mirror you well, you're going to get a sense of, oh, this is me. This is who I am. But a lot of parents, instead of mirroring us, they make it about them, not about us.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm guilty of most, like every parent I know, it
Everybody
is
does.
like, do what I do, don't do what I like, do what I
Yeah,
say, not
well,
what I do, right?
that's right. And listen, and the one thing a kid's going to do is they are going to cooperate. That is one of the strong instincts that we have, is this desire to please and cooperate with our parents. You see, that's hardwired, and it makes sense from evolutionary point of view, is that, look, we need these people the rest of our life, or early on in our life, because we're so dependent on them. So we need to please them and make them happy with us. So we're going to cooperate. The problem is many parents have a hard time identifying a child's cooperation if that child's behavior is not what the parent wants them to be doing.
Mhm. So in a sense, the parents then are taking away the independency, trying to make them dependent, so that they
Well,
will.
it's a little more complex. Let me explain it. See, what happens is that the parents have this expectation, right? If I am raising you, if I'm a good mother or a good father, then you're going to behave.
Yeah.
Meaning you're going to behave the way that's going to make me feel comfortable. So when we're with my friends or we're out in public, you're not going to embarrass me. That's what good behavior is about. You don't embarrass your parents, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's not child-centered, it's really parent-centered, right? Because a child's behavior could be incredibly appropriate given a certain situation and be very embarrassing to a parent.
Mhm.
Let's say a parent emphasizes what you talked about before, this desire to please all the time, and that a kid is experiencing an adult treating them in a way that's not very nice.
Mhm.
And instead of just going along with it, a kid starts to speak up and challenge that adult. Now, in most families, that is not going to be welcome.
Yeah.
In most families, that's going to embarrass the parent, that the parent's going to shut that down, respect your adults. How dare you talk back to an adult?
Yeah.
You should behave this way, you should behave that way. But if that parent looked closer at that behavior, that's not necessarily inappropriate given the context of behavior. Do we want a kid that just says yes all the time? I don't think so. That sets up a lot of problems. What we want is a kid that can say yes when it's appropriate to say yes and say no when it's appropriate to say no.
Mhm.
Because that's the heart of what you've been talking about. You know, people get stuck on the yes part of this thing and they don't have a no in their life. And so they find themselves in situations where they're doing a lot of things they don't want to be doing. They end up giving themselves away or erasing themselves. They end up having sex with someone they don't want to have sex with. They end up giving themselves away in a lot, and men and women do that. It's not just, we used to think women just did that. No, plenty of guys have sex with people that they don't want to have sex with because they should have sex. That's what they're supposed to do. But see, even that, this is where we don't have a culture that's based on wisdom. It's
Yeah.
based on cooperation. It's based on compliance.
Yeah. There's so much truth in what you're saying, and hard, and it's really hard wiring the child and just creating that whole pattern, long-term pattern, that they can't be themselves. With There's the fear of rejection or some sort of abandonment that comes in, that there is such an intense fear that no matter what their story is inside of their head, I want to say this, I'm going to say this, I don't want to do that, whatever it is, there's a problem with it coming out of their mouth without the fear or the running or the yelling or the screaming or whatever kind of chaos ensues.
The hypothesis that Virginia Satir had, and this was in her first book called Conjoint Therapy, I think it was called Conjoint Therapy, and it was about working with couples. And she said that if there is a problem in the family, that the first thing that a clinician needs to be at least suspicious about, that the child is acting out the unresolved conflict between that couple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where the husband or wife may want to say, I'm tired of giving myself away, they don't dare say it because of their fear of abandonment. But now, because the child is cooperating with the deeper desire of the parent, which is to not give themselves away, that child is going to be more quote oppositional and labeled oppositional when what they're really doing is behaving the way the parent would like to behave that the parent doesn't dare behave.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so when I say the child cooperates, a child may fault a child or a parent may fault a child for that behavior instead of realizing this child is manifesting the very thing I'm teaching this child to manifest.
Mm. Yeah.
And no parent wants to hear that, boy. I mean,
Nope.
because that means, guess what? If there's a problem in our family, we got to look at what we're doing. We got to take some responsibility for the atmosphere that we're creating.
Mhm. And that's the thing with the adults, with the parents, is that vulnerability, even connecting with and amongst themselves and with the family unit as a whole, is being open and honest instead of wearing this crown, I'm the king or I'm the queen in the family, and having that I guess control issue, just like, I can't be wrong. I can't let others see me in fault or failure.
So if a kid can't do that, guess what they're doing? They're cooperating with their parents,
Yeah.
right? If a kid relates to everybody in a hierarchical manner, they've learned that from the parents.
Mhm.
See, all of these things we're teaching indirectly, and most of this stuff is learned, Janine. It's not learned verbally. It's not a parent is saying, do this and do that. This is being absorbed by watching that person function that way. That's how we learn these things, is most of our behavior is learned through imitation.
Yeah, the monkey. What is the monkey brain? So when you have a grown adult with kids, maybe the kids are still at home, maybe they're gone, this behavior still goes on, and inside we fall back to that people pleasing wound inside of us, and the inner child, this just like afraid of speaking their mind, speaking the truth, and so there's this life of potential misery, blinds closed, not really reaching their potential because of fear. So when we talk about building healthy boundaries and emotional resilience, what are some tips that you can give on on the power of speaking your mind so that you can actually be authentically yourself?
Well, this is where, so let's go back to instead of pathologizing where people get stuck, think of it as a developmental problem. If I'm stuck at that age of just pleasing all the time, it means I haven't differentiated. That's all. Because differentiated means I'm separating myself from you and I'm keeping a sense of who I am in relationship to you, that I don't get lost in what you need from me. I can cooperate with you. See, a well differentiated person is able to act for themselves without being selfish
Mhm.
and is also able to act for others without losing themselves or being selfless. So I'll say that. So back to this balance. A well differentiated person acts for self without being selfish and acts for others without being selfless,
Mhm. It's beautiful.
without erasing themselves. See, they do what they want to do for someone because they want to do it, not because they're supposed to do it, or they should do it, or they're obligated to do it.
And
And
there's
see,
such a story, right, in the mind that really leads that journey
well,
as to
that's
what.
it. So, back to what you said, what can people do? First of all, people need to work through a lot of self-alienation. You see, when I alienate myself from what I'm doing, then I have very little insight in terms of what's going on. So if you stop someone and says, "What did you do just now? What was that?" Well, if they're not able to answer you, they're alienated from themselves. They're not in touch with what's going on, what they're doing, how they're doing it, what is happening in the moment. Right? They're missing themselves. See, they're not present to their own life. And see, we can't make any of these changes until we start to stoke our awareness. But to stoke your awareness means being willing to see who you're not
Mm.
without judging yourself, accepting yourself as you are. Not that doesn't mean we don't want to change it. It just means that the acceptance becomes a prerequisite for change. And see, so when you get back to, well, what can we do? Well, first of all, own that you don't want to know yourself. Take responsibility for that. Look into what would make it so that, or what would make that a reality that you don't want to learn more about what you're doing and how you're really feeling and what's really going on. What would be a threat about that kind of an awareness in your life? And you see, if you could start to deal with the what we call the resistance to becoming awake, you'll start to wake up.
Mm-hmm. And it's there's
Paradox,
some, go ahead.
yeah. It's just paradoxical, that's all.
Yeah. And there's so many well-worn, deeply well-worn patterns that we aren't conscious of doing. So that
We don't
awakening.
want to be conscious of doing. See, what I'm saying is we don't want to be conscious of doing those things because then we're going to see that these patterns are running our life. We're not running our life.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things that a lot of people will realize once they start paying attention is that we walk around thinking we're running a show.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're being lived by the forces within you. And a lot of these are unconscious. You're not in touch with them. And when you realize that, it's like, whoa, this is incredible. Oh my God. You know, if I'm going to become a determining force in my own life, I need to figure out how I am not that determining force.
Yeah.
See,
Uh,
that's the opposite. See, a lot of people just want to just get to freedom, but you get through freedom to owning how you're not free.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's looking for what's not working in order to get to the place where it's gonna work at. And that's so scary for people because of these, like, what if, like you mentioned, what if I get judged? And it's those fears. They're not
Well, what
really
if I see something about myself I don't like? How am I going to come to grips with that? Am I going to hate myself? What is that going to mean about who I am as a person? See,
yeah.
we all have a certain image about who we are. You know, there's this whole big, Freud was the first one to talk about what he called back then defense mechanisms. Today, we don't use that phrase. We really use this today more as either creative adjustments or adaptations to certain situations. But what a defense mechanism did was to build a fence around you so you weren't aware.
Mhm.
See, so if you think about a defense mechanism as building a fence or a wall around you, and that's what this stuff does, is we build a fence around ourselves so we don't become aware of what we're doing.
Oh,
We
it's
project it on other people. We attribute it to them. We become victims of what they're doing. And there's all kinds of things that we do, you know, to protect our ego or this image of who we think we have to be okay. And so, you know, that becomes the first task. You know, when you say, what does somebody have to do? This is why, you know, going to one of these, and I'm not putting these things down. There's a role for them, but you aren't going to change your life in a weekend.
Mhm.
You can stimulate yourself to get inspired to start doing the work, but it's the beginning. As this is not the end of the beginning, but the beginning of the, or how did Churchill say it? This is not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, or something like that. But it was that thing, is that it just starts our work in this journey to become conscious, to become aware, and to start to be able to claim our life is an ongoing, lifelong journey.
Yeah, and that's one of the first things I remember us talking about was emotional sobriety. It's you'll never actually reach it. It's just a
A
process.
practice. It's a
It's
practice. It's a
practice.
practice. It's a practice, right?
Yeah.
It's a practice. If you think of it as a practice, that's the best way to think about it.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of um, insights that you just gave us, and I mean, it's got my mind ticking because we have so many masks on and around us that we put on to protect ourselves, but really it's in the taking off of all the masks and just looking at ourselves pretty much naked in the mirror and just like, well, who am I? What do I really want? How do I want to be? and then finding out all the pieces that really don't align with that. That's like getting into the garbage can of the soul kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. It's getting in there and becoming aware of ourselves and starting to see what we can do to now reclaim our life. That's what we call it, recovering. We are recovering ourself, right? That we've lost.
Speak about the word recovery, because I've had conversations with people who are just like, "Ooh, no, I don't want to know anything about recovery," and it impacts so many different areas in our life, and also how it sort of impacts the balance that we think we ought to be living.
Well, it's the unfortunate thing is that in most mental health circles, recovery has gotten a bad reputation because people hear the word God and they think that people are abdicating responsibility for their life. God and powerless. See, those two words don't fit in psychology very well.
Mhm.
First of all, psychology tried to move away from theology a long time ago to become a science. So they had to take God and put God over there and psychology over here. The other thing is psychology is about empowerment, right? And just even the seminar you're talking about is empowerment. But in order to get to empowerment, right, we're talking today about owning how we're disempowered. Well, the first step in AA says we are powerless. We admit it, we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Well, it sounds like a cop out. Oh my God, you're powerless. There's nothing you can do about it. Remember the paradoxical theory of change. That's not true. When you own it, then you're able to find a power. But when you're denying it, you can't. See, that's the problem. And see, people don't understand that. And people that really have insight into recovery, they see that there is no copping out with the program. The program is about radical responsibility.
Mm,
It's about really taking responsibility for your life, for how you create your existence, and not, it's counterculture because in our culture, we don't do that.
mm. Yeah, it's about being responsible for what we've done, how we
Talking
react.
about step 8, made a list of all people we've harmed, and become willing to make amends to them all. There's a total accountability. That's part of being radically responsible. Being aware of yourself is being responsible, right? Remember, I said to become a responsible person, you have to first realize how you're alienated from yourself.
Mhm,
You cannot become responsible if you're not owning what you're doing.
mhm.
So see, that's first
Yeah.
that response that being able to own that becomes such an important part, a step in whatever path
Yeah.
you're going to take to your growth. Doesn't matter whether you're using 12 steps, whether you're in psychotherapy, whether you're following, relationship trauma, work, whatever path you're on, you've got to somehow take responsibility for what you're doing and what the existence that you're creating.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's no hope really for resilience, because you're not bouncing back to something, someone, somewhere where it really makes a difference, like that's really important to you.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of years of experience of recovery and doing the work. Um, One question finally is like, do you still have a lot of work to go? Like for those who are just maybe starting into the playground of awareness and transforming and emotional, physical sobriety and freedom and all of that. Tell us, your journey in a brief, not your entire journey, but where you're at
Well,
now.
I think the way to describe it is to just think about development. See, even in recovery is developmental. And so the things that I was aware of and working on in my first year of recovery are very different than now. Here I am 53 years into the process. So it definitely follows the same path from a more simplistic position to a more complex. And so what happens is just think about how we learn mathematics. So you first have to learn how to add and subtract numbers. So you start to get a sense of what addition and subtraction are about. When you master that, you're ready for what? Multiplication. Because multiplication, if I say 2 times 3, what I'm doing is I'm adding 3 plus 3 to equal 6. So multiplication is understood as a form of addition.
Right. Hmm.
Then we add, division into the process, then fractions. And so now we start breaking numbers into different into fractions. And we start to learn how to add and multiply and divide fractions. You see, so we're going from a very, very simple set of constructs to a much more complex system. If you stay in school, like when I took college mathematics, it was very different than the mathematics I took in grammar school
Yeah.
because it was more complex. When I eventually took a calculus class, that was a mind blower in terms of how complex mathematics could be. And I was just tasting the complexity. It even gets crazier from that point in terms of quantum mechanics and all of that other stuff that I'm not schooled in. But our development follows the same phase, right? You have to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. You see what I mean? You have to learn a few words before you can start putting sentences together. You start putting sentences together. Now you can now express thoughts. I mean, our whole life follows that pattern. And so recovery follows that same pattern. The things we're doing now in our life today, meaning those people that are listening to the summit, where you're at today is going to be very different than you're at in a year from now if you do the work. Then you're going to be moving to more wisdom. You're going to be moving to a greater awareness, a higher level of consciousness. And the situations that were difficult and baffling for you today may not be that challenging for you down the road because you've learned some things. But there'll be a whole new set of challenges.
Hmm.
And that's once again, if the expectation is
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
oh, great, now I get another opportunity to see what I can do to learn how to deal with this, then we welcome that challenge. But if my expectation is, oh my God, I should not have trouble with this,
Hmm.
I'm sunk.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to get lost in objecting about it. I'm going to get mad about it, mad at myself about it, judging myself. I'm not going to learn the lesson.
Yeah. And that's resiliency right there. It's really like
That's
living in
part
and
of it.
playing.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So much
Yeah.
goodness. So much goodness, Dr. Allen. Is there anything else that you want to add before we
No,
wrap?
no, I think that's a mouthful.
That was a lot. Like there's a lot of
Well,
um
it's pretty dense and I think that people may end up listening to this a few times to unpack it.
yeah, well, I'm gonna be one of those because it does it that's what you've done is just gone, here is life, and here's a great way to approach it if you want to become um really in tune with yourself, your feelings, and in your relationships. And it does take the work. And that's the thing that like our society nowadays, it just wants such an easy solution.
See, that's it. See, that's the expectation.
Yeah.
If life could be easy, and it's very interesting that when you study, let's say male initiation rites, what is one of the lessons that these young boys go through to become men? And it's true across, it's universal across initiation rites, that the first lesson, and it's taught in a lot of different ways, but it's always taught, is that life will be difficult.
Hmm.
And so if I set that as my expectation,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, bring it on, bring it on. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So now I got to figure out this one. Instead of it being, oh no,
Yeah.
oh, something must be wrong. It's difficult. You see, I mean, it's such a different way of looking at things. So if that's my baseline,
Yeah.
then I can cope with it instead of getting hung up and objecting to it and getting all lost in what this means about me and being wrong or defective instead of that here's another lesson.
Yeah. And that's the whole premise behind the this is a challenge versus this is an opportunity. So yeah, and
And they
that's
both can be true. See, a challenge can be an opportunity, but
mm,
it's a difference between it being a problem
yeah,
versus a challenge and opportunity. See, that's how I say it differently. If we look at it as a problem, then we see it as something that has to be that we shouldn't have. You're not supposed to have problems.
because
But if
life
we,
is easy, right?
there we go back to that.
Yeah,
If we just say, hey, this is a challenge, and look, it's challenging me beyond what I'm currently capable of dealing with. It's time for me to grow some new skills.
yeah. It's that's the opportunity there. Oh, so much goodness, so much wisdom. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for
Um,
having me,
so
Janine.
how can people get in touch with you? I know you've got your weekly call still.
So every Thursday night is an open um, community that focuses on emotional sobriety. It's an emotional sobriety workshop. It happens from 7 to 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and there'll be a link that I'll provide for you that people can just come in. You're a member of the group if you say you are. We typically get anyone from 100 to 200 people every week from all over the world. They come to learn about emotional sobriety, and those people that have been hanging in have talked about how this is just a help them create a whole different consciousness in their life, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's one way. My website it's very easy, www.ab, my initials, Alan Berger, abphd.com. So people can get me that way. That's also my email address, abphd@msn.com.
Yeah, and
And
we'll
so you
put
can
all
get
the links
me,
in there.
touch me in that way. And my books are all on Amazon at this point in time. I have a Gestalt therapy training program that meets once a month. And like you said, I am in private practice. I do consultations and work with people on an individual basis. I do a lot of speaking at conferences and training, going out to teach people about emotional sobriety and training institutions and how to bring that into their curriculum.
You've made such an impact on so many people. I know that for
Yeah,
sure.
Janine,
So
for an
thank
opportunity to share some of that.
yeah, well, anytime, you know it. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
no, I wish you all the success in this conference. It's very important the message you're carrying.
yeah. And I think it's just the more people that start to even be curious about what is this emotional sobriety or even emotional freedom and resilience. What is it? Just even ask that instead of going, ah, nothing's wrong with me. I'm fine. Just, cruising at this altitude.
That can open the door, can it?
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. If you boil emotional sobriety down to one thing, I'd say it's curiosity.
Yeah. I love that.
It's curiosity.
Curiosity is the
Just
key
curiosity
that opens up the lock to emotional
opens up
sobriety.
a lot.
Yeah.
Curiosity and following that curiosity.
Mhm. So on that note, keep on being curious. Like that's play to me,
Right. I
curiosity,
am. See,
and we're
see,
born.
I'm being bring a playful curiosity to your life and you will grow.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And for everyone out there, hope you've enjoyed it. We'll drop all the links in there. Change your thoughts, change your mind, and you can change your life. So have a good day. And thank you again, Dr. Berger.